I would say the main thing of this hearing is the fact that we need to have confidence in the integrity of our election. And we have to recognize the reality that right now, and quite honestly for the last 4 years, that hasn't existed. 2016, illegitimate result, resistant. You remember the famous tweet by Mark Zaid. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but something like, coup's begun, impeachment will follow. That's what we've been living with 4 years. Different election, different result, different side. And the reality is people have concerns. And I'm just saying these are legitimate concerns. You mentioned the courts. I've acknowledged the process has worked its way to a conclusion. I've got something like 59 court cases. Now, many of these, as Mr. Troop has talked about, some were not decided on the facts. They're just decided and dismissed based on standing, which is, again, that's our process. That's a legitimate decision by a court, but it's not very satisfying for people who have some facts that want to be considered by a court. Or Mr. Bernal, the same thing in Nevada. So to deny the reality that we have a problem, a very serious problem, that's not the main. The main thing is we have to acknowledge that problem, and we have to work together to fix it, to restore the confidence. So let me just see if I can wake up Mr. Ryan and Mr. Palmer, make sure they're there. Ask a couple of questions of each of you, and then I'll give all of you the opportunity to kind of make a relatively brief. I mean, this is actually a long hearing for us. I know the Judiciary Committee sometimes goes on long, but this is a long hearing for our committee, and I really do appreciate the involvement of as many members who took this thing seriously. But Mr. Ryan, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I am. Thank you, Senator.
Okay. Sorry about that. I hope you had lunch or something in the interim. Representative Ryan, in our conversations, you were talking about, as Mr. Bernal talked about, your inability to get access to certain things that, I would hope Director Krebs would agree should be transparent, and that those of you having questions about or even challenging results should have access to in order to mount an effective challenge. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely, Senator. As a former chair of an audit committee of publicly traded companies and currently the chair of the audit committee of the Public School Employee Retirement System, the control environment is a critical component of it. Mr. Krebs is referring to, as an example, the security systems, and I don't dispute his comments on that at all, and I applaud the great work that's been done at CISA. But until the entire control environment, that's the tone at the top, has been properly evaluated and documented to where you can have a Six Sigma or lean systems approach that allows you to be able to have this transparent, auditable result, it violates one of the basic principles of any systems of internal controls. One of the things that we tried to deal with the Sarbanes-Oxley bill that I think was done effectively was this concept of control deficiencies, significant deficiencies, and material weaknesses. The absence of the ability to provide a timely audit of that information is problematic. And I would just like to just make this comment. I've spent a lifetime as a reserve officer, and so I was also on active duty, either in Operation Uphold Democracy in Haiti, Operation Iraqi Freedom. I helped supervise some of the elections results in Iraq in 2005 after I was called out of retirement. And I would pray that all those sacrifices made by the millions upon millions of people who served in our military to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against enemies, foreign and domestic, would be upheld as well on our shores, so we can ensure the same type of election integrity that we're asking for with transparent, fair, and accurate results can be assured within the United States. We know 44 of the states apparently went off without a hitch, so we have 6 states that we're dealing with. That's a pretty good track record, but unfortunately, when you consider the fact that the 4 of the states were that razor-thin margin close, the results of the election could have been in question. I concur, Senator, that most of the results have already been looked at from a challenge from a legal perspective, so it's probably a moot point for the current election, but I pray that the Senate will take up this battle standard and say we need to really reaffirm to make sure that the people have the faith and confidence in our election systems. I try to live by a triangle of faith. The faith is to believe is to have faith, and to have faith is to have trust. Whenever that trust triangle is broken, we will have difficulties and discord will follow. And I pray to God that every person listening to this testimony hears your words and says, let's have a peaceful resolution of all of these concerns that we have so we can get on with business as usual.
Well, thank you, Representative Ryan, and thank you for your service. And we will come back to you for your closing comment. Mr. Palmer, in our discussion prior to this hearing, and again, I appreciate your service and in your membership of the commission, you talked about some things that troubled you with this election. Can you just kind of review those with the committee?
Well, a few of the things that I was concerned about, I think that raised the emotions from the political campaigns. Some of it was the treatment of poll watchers. I believe transparency is a very important thing, and one of the concerns I had was that people need to be treated with respect. I understand as an election administrator that often we are doing our job and we don't believe anybody needs to be watching the process. But some of the reports, it gets back to sort of the way we treat each other in this country. You know, and if a poll watcher is observing the process, they have a right to be there. They observe the process. They need to be respectful of the election official. There were some significant reports that process was, was interfered with, and people were treated very poorly. And it's not the first time. I worked at the Department of Justice in the Civil Rights Division, and one of the things that I saw often was based on party or race. You know, citizens treat each other poorly, and even in the context of elections. And so I think that we need to make a commitment of respect toward each other and to each political campaign. I think that was the major issue. I think that hearing a lot of the reports about the inaccuracy of the voter rolls, I've been talking about this for a long time. It's because there's just not the focus or the resources provided at the state or local level, in my opinion, to maintain the accuracy of the voter rolls. I think that a lot can be done in a nonpartisan way, in a very smart way with technology. Election officials don't often have the latest technology, and so upgrades to voter registration systems and to resources of data can help them clean and make sure their rolls are as accurate as can be. And frankly, I just think that this has become somewhat of a partisan issue, and therefore any attempt to maintain the accuracy of the rolls can be seen as a negative. This is what happens, is that if you have highly inaccurate rolls, then there's perception of fraud. Sometimes there's actual fraud. We actually see that. And it may not change an election except in a close race, but our job as administrators to make sure that there is no fraud and mitigate and minimize any irregularities. That's the goal. Only with technology and resources and a commitment to doing it will we see those instances decrease. And that's I believe technology and resources are some bipartisan ways to decrease that, sir.
If you could also, because your commission does act to certify some of these voting machines, not all of them, but in some states you do, can you just quickly, and I mean quickly, go through kind of what that certification process is? And I think that was one of the issues you did see is, somebody trying to get back into those machines inside that certification process.
Well, we have a certification process for voting systems. One of the vulnerabilities that we have, and I believe CISA would agree, is that the non-voting systems that are tied to the internet, they perform important functions like voter registration, electronic poll books. There is no standards or testing, and that's one of the things that we're trying to do at the EAC with adequate funding we could do. But it's a big gap in our defenses, and it's one that we may not have been burned this time, but it is a vulnerability, and we need to take care of it.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, now we'll move to closing statements here, and we'll go in reverse order. So, again, former Director Krebs, again, I appreciate your service to the country. I appreciate what you accomplished. I mean, as you know, I've acknowledged that repeatedly. I mean, I think the fact that we've gone from 82 to 95% paper backup, that's all great stuff. And I certainly appreciate you coming here and testifying today. So I'll let you, with any closing comments, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman Johnson. I'm going to keep this short because I think this is a historic hearing for me. This may be the longest hearing that I've had in this chamber, so I will try to wrap this one up quickly. First is thank you to you for your ongoing and constant support of CISA. You were key in getting us across the finish line in the Senate and ultimately in November of 2018. So thank you for your leadership there, supporting other key initiatives for the agency, including the administrative subpoena bill. So thank you for that. Just a quick comment to the team at CISA, if they're watching, it was an honor to lead. Thank you for that opportunity to lead you. You've got a great future ahead of you. Keep at it. And then lastly, thank you to the other witnesses for showing up today, and thank you for what they do. But again, thank you to your leadership here, and good luck.
I thought maybe based on the retention issue, you might encourage him to stay a little bit longer, but I'll do that. Mr. Bunnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We cannot ignore voter fraud away. We can't just wish it away. Unfortunately, that's what the media these past weeks has been trying to do. In the most biased reporting I think I've ever seen, or even in headlines, they try to claim that the evidence I've seen with my own eyes is somehow not there. We can't wish it away. It is just simply right now a gaslighting attempt on America. This is real. This happened. We have to address it. We cannot intimidate the problem away. Rightfully, much testimony today has talked about why it's so important that government officials, election officials, not be intimidated. But myself, the lawyers on my team, volunteers, whistleblowers, there's a number of people who have stood up for this fraud that have faced similar death threats, similar intimidation, similar harassment. We don't pay it, I don't pay it a lot of attention because no one is ever going to intimidate me away from pursuing the truth, pursuing the law, representing my client. But we need to make sure that other groups that are out there that are encouraging the intimidation of lawyers, even from threatening to go after their bar cards on one side, going after their clients, or going after their safety or their lives. That cannot stand either. We cannot stonewall it away. I talked briefly about some stonewalling attempts. One other that we ran across in Nevada is that we had Postal Service employees that we knew of that were directly told to deliver ballots to undeliverable addresses. That is what resulted in ballots being littered all across apartment mailrooms and trash cans everywhere. And they were told in many instances to deliver ballots to undeliverable addresses. And the United States Postal Service, they obstructed our ability to get that evidence in our case. We lost one of our 15 depositions because the United States Postal Service actually obstructed that. It raises the question with all this stonewalling that we encountered. What do you have to hide? And I think we know in this case what there is to hide. I said in my opening statement that government by consent of the governed is hard to win and easy to lose. That's why it's so important that we take this so incredibly seriously. Senator Hawley told a very important story about his constituents, and I ask all senators to think about their constituents, to think about how you're supposed to tell your constituents to turn out to vote if they don't know that it's their vote that's going to matter, that they don't know that their vote is going to be canceled out by the fraud of somebody else. Their vote's going to be diluted by these irregularities. We can't pretend that this problem didn't happen. It did. This is the United States of America. We don't run from that, we fix it. We have to use every arrow in our quiver to fix it because it did happen. And it's now on all of us to make sure that we fix it. I really appreciate the committee's time and the chairman's time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bunnell. Representative Ryan.
Senator, thank you very much for your courage in having this hearing. If I could just conclude with these comments. Our nation is at a crossroads. No matter what happens with any of the work that is being done relative to looking at this since probably about the year 2000, and apparently even went back as far as 1787, although I wasn't there for that particular meeting, shortly thereafter, but not that one. The consent of the governed will determine whether or not they believe in the results of any election. It has gotten significantly worse. It's one of the reasons I ran for office and was elected in 2016, obviously later in my life. We have to examine the processes from start to finish. CISA has done a phenomenal job in so many different respects, and under the concerns relative to COVID-19, I actually recommend using the CISA standards. And for all the poll watchers, all the poll workers, the directors of election, God bless them for the great work that they've done. By the same token, there's a point in time now where we as a nation have to sit back and say, we have to solve these problems. We have to take a look at the entire process from start to finish and the ability of people to interfere with those election results. The ability of the person to be able to change the system of control so that we can no longer rely on it. I've heard some of the comments today, and I go back to what I heard in 2007 and 2008 when I was a practicing CPA, keeping companies out of bankruptcy, and Meredith Whitney was bringing up the concerns she had about the strength and stability of the banking industry, and she was vilified. Michael Lewis, when he wrote The Big Short, was vilified. The assumption was that no documentation loans were not dangerous. Ignore that concern that both of them had, nothing to be concerned about. Shortly thereafter, there was a triggering event and the housing bubble burst, and the United States was thrust into one of the worst issues that we've had to deal with financially in a long time. Many states are still recovering. I would tell you we are at that seminal moment today relative to the sanctity of our elections that have probably been building since 1787. But now is the time for all of us to sit back and say we need to not vilify one another. And Senator, I applaud you for your willingness to get to an open, transparent basis here. But we need to sit down and do these types of hearings. As much as the Band-Aid being pulled off may be painful, we need to expose these concerns so that people, the 150 million people who voted, can once again feel with confidence that the election process works and their vote mattered. Senator, thank you for your time and for the great work of your entire staff.
Well, thank you, Representative Ryan, for your testimony and your service to this country. Mr. Troupis.
Senator, thank you very much. I want to say that right off the bat that I'm honored to represent the president. I was honored to get the call, but I'm not naive. One of the reasons I was called is because virtually every major law firm in this country and in this city refused to represent the president, not because of the lack of merit of his claims. We've certainly demonstrated there's merit, but because of the cancel culture, because of the environment that has been created by the left that has intimidated lawyers. So they can't be here. They're not here because, from the giant law firms precisely because they were ordered by their management committees and others that you cannot take those cases. And the reason you cannot take those cases is because our clients or the Democrat Party or the incoming administration will remember that, and they will hold it against you. That's a sad state of affairs. As a former judge, I was so incensed by that I took the representation. That was the ultimate reason I took that representation. And I've heard a lot today about what went on afterwards, as if these latest threats are coming from the right. Remember why and how this started after the election. We need to have faith in our court system. We have to acknowledge that the court system has been deeply intimidated by the left, just as the lawyers have been intimidated. And that is a sad, sad state of affairs. And I so much appreciate, Senator, that you're holding these hearings, because otherwise, as we're finding out all over the country, these items just disappear. Number two, I wanted to say, as I've said throughout my testimony, that one of the reasons people are doubting the election is because the other side here, the Biden campaign's primary defense is don't hear the evidence. Don't let them litigate. Don't have a court rule on the substance. Let's be honest, that's what's going on. And so that's why the public doesn't trust this outcome. It's not about the president. It's about what the other side is doing to intimidate and force people not to listen, not to take the evidence. I've heard lots of fancy words here today about if you give transparency, if you let the issues come out, and I've represented Republicans and I've represented Democrats, and at the end of the day, lawyers do their job when it is in the open and we are able to present the evidence, and I so appreciate the fact that you, a non-lawyer, is taking on this task here. But finally, and I have to say this, we had 4,000 people volunteer from everywhere in the country to come to Wisconsin to participate in the process. We had over 2,500 volunteers over a 10-day period take their own time, their own money, come from all over the country, and they came and they attended the recount and they participated. And I said to the recount on the floor, the Democrats and the Republicans, I said, if you are losing your faith in the greatness of this republic, look at this recount. Look at the number of people from the Trump campaign and from the Biden campaign that would give of their time and effort to be here, in that case in Madison, Wisconsin. It was humbling, truly humbling for me and everyone on our legal team and everyone who was there. We have a great system and people want to participate. Let's make it transparent. And again, I can't thank those volunteers enough. They're the ones who make this democracy work.
Thank you, Mr. Troops. And I noticed Mr. Banal shaking his head when you were talking about the fact that lawyers from large law firms were more than discouraged. They were actually prevented from representing the president, which is kind of a sad state of affairs. I'll also say, storefronts in big cities didn't board up their windows in anticipation of a Vice President Biden victory. Commissioner Palmer.
Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I will make a few comments. The EAC is looking at holding a series of hearings and to issue a report on some nonpartisan recommendations. There's going to be a lot of policy disputes around the country in state legislatures, and that could be debated back and forth about what's the best policies on certain areas. But we as the election administration community want to do better. We understand that oftentimes there are flaws in the way we administer elections. It happens in every election. We could always do better. The way we respond in the election administration community, just like the military, is more education and more training and more resources when available. And that is really the recipe, I believe, moving forward, is if you want to improve the performance of election officials and their election workers within an office and our poll workers, it will take a commitment of time, resources, and training to do so. And the EAC is prepared to do that, free to localities if with appropriate funding. I think that is really my solution, thinking back to my military days. Whenever there was an issue, more education and more funding, more training.
Thank you, Commissioner Palmer. Judge Starr, you are leadoff hitter. Now you're batting cleanup here, so thank you for hanging in there. You have some closing comments.
I think the bottom of the order, Mr. Chairman, but thank you. Thank you for your leadership. In a real sense, today's hearing has been a tribute to the Constitution. I love Senator Carper's comments about December 7, 1787, and the idea to form a more perfect union, and this hearing has been in that spirit. I'm also reminded of one of President Lyndon Johnson's favorite quotes from the prophet Isaiah, "Come, let us reason together." And I think this has been a time of reasoning together and listening and the great traditions of the United States Senate. So let me close with words that I heard with my own ears from United States Senator Alan Simpson, now the tender age of 89 in retirement. And when he was addressing in his valedictory at the Kennedy Institute of Politics, which he headed for 2 years, he told the audience, and it was in very hushed tones, because whatever your politics were, Alan Simpson was a great man and recognized to be that. And he closed with these words: in politics, if you don't have integrity, you don't have anything. And what this hearing is trying to do is to how can we, in fact, promote not just confidence in government, but how can we, in fact, promote the integrity and honesty, which is at the bedrock of the kind of government in whom we can trust. So thank you for the honor of appearing before the committee.
Well, thank you, Judge Starr, for your participation, for your service to this country. I do want to make a comment. We spoke to, and we were very appreciative of the fact that Dominion Systems, Edison Research, AP, a number of people we spoke to prior to this hearing. Now, they didn't all participate, but we will leave the record open, and I encourage everybody we spoke to and people that we didn't, if you want to input information into this record, you've got a couple weeks to do it, and I encourage it. And our staff will look at that, and we will vet it. We'll call you. We'll ask questions. This hearing is not dangerous. What would be dangerous is not discussing this openly and frankly with transparency. This is a problem that we have to acknowledge and recognize and solve together. And we're only going to do that with information. So I'm soliciting information. Okay, this is only part of the process. There was oversight before this hearing. There needs to be oversight after this in the next Congress. Hopefully I can work with Senator Carper, who I think we all recognize has done a pretty good job of outreach here and some pretty bipartisan words here. So I'm hoping that's how we can move forward. Because I truly think as Americans we share the same goal. We all want a safe, prosperous, secure country, state, community. That's what we want. We want to be able to raise our children in safety and freedom. And the way it works in this country is through participation in the democratic process. So I think everybody in this panel wants to make sure that we have good participation. We encourage citizens to participate. We also want every legitimate vote to count. But we should be every bit in favor of making sure that every vote is legitimate. And that's what this is all about. If we can put the controls in place and actually act on them, it's great having paper ballots, but you have to have access to look at it to give yourself confidence in the current election and moving forward that, okay, this all worked out. Wisconsin's recount, totally honest, our count was almost 100% accurate. Other issues, but again, I think Wisconsin, we got a pretty good level of confidence, so we run our elections right now. I'll just give another shout out to Jeanette Mertens. My county clerk, my clerk of courts in the town of Oshkosh, and I'm sure the vast majority are just like Jeanette. We're in really good hands. So conclude, this is my last hearing. It has been an honor and privilege to chair this committee. Hearing's adjourned.